what's been the biggest challenge that you found in property? And were you having those doubts and those things like, is this really possible for me?
100% biggest challenge is yourself. It all kind of came to a head in a crescendo, which was like, yeah, clearly I need to do something about this. Is like when my wife was pregnant with our first child, I felt more pressure. After I went into property full time, the following 2 years I probably lost about 100 grand. Bad decision making, bad schemes, like training schemes, rabbit holes, etc. Fueled by my ego pretty much.
Do you actually enjoy property, or is it more the vehicle that brings the money in?
Well, yeah, one of my philosophies is if you can't enjoy it, then what's the point?
Tanner, welcome to the Inspired By Show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we've had this in the pipeline on and off for so long, and you've travelled all the way up to London.
Yeah, I know.
So thank you. Yeah. Thank you for being here. Now, Tanner, I find this interview quite funny because we know each other quite well.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm trying to think of things that maybe I don't know about you, but actually maybe many of our listeners maybe don't know anything about you. So if you were to summarise yourself, how would you introduce yourself to people who maybe don't know you?
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because obviously we do know each other very well. So in summary, I would say, yeah, primarily property. I'm very property focused, right? So I kind of will do everything related to property pretty much. So I've been a property investor for 14 years. I've been a property coach, mentor been mentoring and coaching for the last 7. So yeah, I'm kind of pretty much property investor, coach, also dabble in business acquisition and investment as well, but primarily property.
Wow. And one of the things I do know about you, Tanner, is you're very strategic minded. Mm-hmm. You know, even then, like business acquisition, like you're always for like, what's the next strategic play?
Yeah.
Have you always been a very strategic, logical person, or is that something you've like learned through your property journey?
Well, I'm a trained civil engineer. So I used to actually be a civil engineer. So I sort of got that engineering brain, mm-hmm. so to speak, you know, quite sort of in depth in terms of the detail. That's certainly where I came from, and then but over the years where I've sort of transitioned more into my own stuff, into starting my own business, running and you're fending for yourself a little bit, I feel you sort of have to become a little bit more entrepreneurial. You have to start thinking a bit more strategically. So I think to answer your question, yeah, probably well, I suppose somebody asked me a question once on a similar podcast. It was like, explain yourself, and I was I'm basically an overthinker who sometimes underthinks. And I think that summarizes me up quite nicely.
I think it does from what I know about you. That's hilarious. And then you're like to me, I don't think about that. And I'm like, Tanner, you literally think of everything normally. Like I've never been mentored. Obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, I know you're one of my mentors in the property space. And I always find it fascinating. You find things that people don't often think about or say. But it's just really fascinating to see how your brain works. Yeah. And I've been on mentoring calls with you, and then you're doing all this funky stuff with deal analysis, and everyone's like, 1 minute we're all with you, and the next minute you're like, you're still there, you know, because that's how your brain really is. So how does someone go from being a civil engineer to being a property investor? Like what was going through your mind to make
I think primarily it stemmed from, but like that's with most people, a desire to have something different to what you kind of got, and it's all lifestyle, right? So at the time, so working in London, I had a job in Croydon as a civil engineer, and it was okay. I quite enjoyed it. I had quite a cool job, and I wanted to basically grow in that. But I wanted to grow in that, but it never really was like a passionate thing. So I never really thought beyond civil engineering really, but I was never committed truly to it. It was only really when I was trying to get a secondment to Turkey, which is really kind of where things that's probably a really big change for me. So my dad's a Turkish Cypriot, so I've got like roots in North Cyprus, and obviously with Turkish language and stuff and the culture. So, and every year we'd go on holidays to Cyprus, etc. I've got a lot of family over there, so that cultural side is rooted inside me. And so when I got this job as a civil engineer, they had contacts in Turkey with contact projects, right? With Turkey projects. So they sort of saw the connection and put me involved, quite as a young engineer, and put me onto those projects quick, which was cool because it meant I was traveling to Turkey quite a lot, and as a result, I made some good connections and contacts over there. And there was an opportunity, or I was trying to create an opportunity for me to go and get seconded into Turkey for like a year. That would have helped my civil engineering. This is all the kind of irrelevant stuff. We won't get into the property in a minute, but and it didn't happen. It basically just dragged, and 9 months passed basically where I'd handed all my projects over and I just had nothing to do. And it was in that 9-month window or period where it was like, every week. It was like, yeah, I think you should be there in 4 weeks. You should be there in 4 weeks. And you're like, okay, well, I'm kind of living by your rules a little bit without really knowing, without any certainty. But that is then when I found property. It's then when I was found, oh, actually, there's something else that I could do where I could have more control over. And also, the type of projects I was working on were like massive stuff that rarely got built as well. So I was like, well, with property, I could actually, I'm good with numbers anyway, so I understand how to structure those things. But basically, I could work on something that I could get my hands dirty on, see the fruits of my labor quicker. So like something like with immediate, would you say, like immediate feedback on what you do. Plus, I can have way more control over my time. And, if I could turn it into a full-time thing, then, I don't need to be working in a big corporation. And that's really I'd say the big game-changing which then led me from engineering to property to where I suppose I am now. And I think if that hadn't have happened, if I did end up in Turkey on that secondment, I probably wouldn't be here, maybe. Or maybe I might be, but maybe in a different guise, or in certainly a different position. But
I love that when you look back at moments, like pivotal moments where don't feel pivotal at the time.
Yeah.
If anything, it didn't feel pivotal. You were just like, for God's sake, when is this going to go? Like a week.
Yeah.
And here you are now. So when did property become a real thing? And what I mean by that is there are so many accidental landlords. There are so many people who have property, maybe have inherited or found it and thought, I'll get one property and then I'll move on to the next. When did you actually start to get this hope of like, this actually might be a really good financial opportunity for me and a career and a business and so on?
Probably 2011, 2012, I'd say. So I bought a property in Wimbledon, which is where I had the vision to buy it, and it was a good time to buy, obviously off the back of the financial crash. So property prices had dropped a lot. This property was on the market at 330-ish, I think it was, and I was kind of first time buyer, proceedable. Just made a cheeky offer at like 280 or whatever. Anyway, ended up buying it for 288, I think it was, that we bought in the end. This 2-bedroom flat in Wimbledon, which was, such good value for the price and the size. And but the vision was to kind of move in to it and do it up, because I was single as well, so I was kind of didn't have really any attachments or dependency. So I was move into it, do it up, live there while I was doing it up, and then flip it, and then move into something bigger and sort of do the stepping stone model, which is kind of all I know and what a lot of people kind of think property is about, right? So I started there, and it was only then after a couple of years of doing that in 2012 that I then started to realize and learn, oh, okay, there's another way of doing this. And so I read some books, the classic, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Simon Zucchi's Property Magic book was a great book.
Now, I just wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to share a quick message with you. Now, I've been hosting these interviews with Inspired by Show for a while now, and I've been loving all of the great feedback from our listeners. And it really means a lot when you all share from listening to these episodes, watching these episodes, share your incredible feedback. And I love that you love it as much as we do. Now, my mission for the Inspired by Show is to inspire others to challenge the norm, share their story, knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable and, shock horror, take the mask off and be raw and real. So I have a favour to ask. Can you help me on this mission by sharing this episode with someone who you think needs to hear this message? Maybe there's a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know that would really benefit from hearing this inspiring story. If you could do that to help us, help even more people to challenge the norm and push themselves out of their own comfort zone, then I'd really appreciate it. So if you haven't already, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a colleague, or someone that you know would benefit. Now, back to the episode.
That I found at the time, and that was probably a key thing, a bit of learning as well. So, I didn't realize you could do it in a slightly different way. And so it was at that point when I thought, well, hang on a minute, is there an opportunity to basically get out of my job and do this full time? And so it was 2012, and then in 2013, having spent probably 18 months of just learning and jumping, and everything I could possibly do to kind of absorb, I bought my first then buy-to-let style investment property, which I converted into a student let in Portsmouth. And it was at that point I was like, oh yeah, this is actually quite a lot easier than I kind of ever thought it was. And then it kind of went from there. So yeah, that was really the pivotal time, because then only a year later I then was able to quit my job and then go into property. So it was well actually the truth is I went down to part-time on a contract, and my employer at the time were really supportive. It was great. And then so I worked part-time for 9 months, and then on the 1st of January 2015 I just was like, right, pull the safety net away and just kind of try and sink or swim.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious to know, like, what's been the biggest challenge that you found in your early days in property, and were you having those doubts and those things like, is this really possible for me?
100% biggest challenge is yourself, like, as in, so I went full-time 2015, and then probably within basically 2 years later, 2.5 years later, basically had a breakdown, because just you have to learn a whole load new of like kind of skills that you never really taught. So in terms of like, discipline, structure, time management, focus, not overthinking things, or basically overthinking things, like worry of financial side of anxiety, etc. So I think definitely was the biggest challenge. It was pretty much all internal. It's like all up here, really. It's like balancing the emotion of now no longer having a safety net of an income, to then having to, well, basically feel like you're completely in charge of your destiny. Like if you fuck it up, you're screwed, right? Fortunately, I never did actually fuck it up. It was fine. But I think mentally, I probably put too much pressure on myself to maybe expect more as well. Plus, I feel like that was also when social media was starting to really build momentum as well. So, I would see people on social media achieving all these things that I wanted to achieve, but then also being afraid of sharing my opinion or thoughts because then of the judgment that, you get. And so that compounded as well, I think, mentally. So yeah, I think that was definitely the biggest challenge. I think, again, so there was a few things actually. So yeah, mentally one, social media two, and I think also that was also prime kind of property training course, webinar style rabbit holes that, that are available. Not to say that they're all bad, but, there's a lot of that was happening then, and these still does now. But so I fell down a few of those rabbit holes as well, and probably invested money where I didn't need to, looking for that kind of get rich quick pill that doesn't exist. And then you realize the hard way, having spent loads of money and now loads of time and not really got many results. So a bit of those three combined, I think, if I'm honest, in the early days. But then once you take a step back, which I did take a step back, and you kind of learn a bit more about yourself, the way that I kind of think, the way that, the things that I'm good at, the things that I work, the environments that I work well in, that's when I sort of tried to, go a bit more easy on myself and just sort of rebuilt it from there. So really, it was kind of like my property journey is sort of taken 3 phases. It was sort of like that early phase, which was, I can totally get this and make a bit of a success, build up a bit of income, quit my job, success, hit that goal. Then the next period, which was like loads of rabbit holes, overthink it, mini breakdown, and then taking those learnings from those 2 phases and just reinventing myself at that point, like sort of 2017, 2018, and then just going in with a completely different attitude of, fuck it, what I've got to lose, really. And then but also focusing on what I was good at, and then it kind of exponentially grew from there. So, and today we're in a completely different thing that I probably wouldn't have ever imagined I'd be at, back when you started. But
yeah, I think that's the most inspiring part though, Tanner, is that a lot of people, and you brought up the webinars, the property training world, which we're not going to slate. I've had some fantastic guests on the show who have been great at it. I speak at a lot of the events that talk about it, but you and I both know that people can get sucked into a rabbit hole and actually not have the insight or the self-awareness to come out. And I want to talk, you mentioned there about that sort of like mini breakdown. What did that show up like for you? Because I think a lot of people go through this property journey and they expect it to go from A to B. They expect it to be a straight line, and they expect property is a secure thing to invest in. It's very logical, follow these steps and you won't make money. But obviously it's not always the case to be so straightforward. So tell us about that moment where you had what you called that mini breakdown, and that moment where you had to take a step back. Like how did you know? What was it like for you?
I think, I think there's a load of factors, and I think to pin something on someone or something, a certain part of the industry is probably not fair. But I think it's also because the most important aspect to recognize is that ultimately you've got to take your own responsibility for yourself, right? And I think though sometimes like the way that the world's going at the moment, certainly in terms of social media and the marketing, capitalism, etc., it's like, well, here's the solution for you. All you've got to do is this, right? Here's the kind of that shiny penny or golden pill or whatever the saying is, right? So people therefore expect that the other people who are selling this product or service are going to solve your problems, but actually they're not their problems. They might have a certain solution, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So I think the big thing for me was like recognizing actually, and also taking some time for myself, actually, what is it that I kind of wanted ultimately? What is it that I was trying to create? And I think a lot of people don't really take the time to work that out. I think they sort of follow somebody shouts, come and do this, and they're like, oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I want a better life. I want more money. I want, a better lifestyle, whatever. Let's do that because that sounds like it appeals, but it might not necessarily align with who they are or what they're going to do or what their skill sets are, or etc. So I think for me, it was just, I knew property was going to create the lifestyle that I wanted, but I didn't really know what the lifestyle I wanted was, because for me, it was just all about money. And then I got transfixed about the money. Like if I wasn't making enough money, then, I felt guilty that I was on the golf course or watching Netflix, whatever, when I could be making more money, right?
Looking about when you went through that mini breakdown, what were the signs and symptoms, and how did you know that that's what you were going through? And it wasn't just like a crack on and mind over matter vibe.
Oh, well, the signs were stress, obviously, but also anxiety. But it all kind of came to a head in a crescendo, which was like, clearly I need to do something about this, is like when my wife fell pregnant with our first child. Because I think one of the things always for me was like to be like the hands-on dad. So like that was always my vision. That was one of the things I did want, is that I wanted to, when I had kids, be there, breakfast, lunch, dinner, etc., overnight. With if I'm up all night, it doesn't matter because I don't have to work the next day, that kind of thing. So I really wanted to be hands-on, and I think that's driven probably by the fact that when I was younger, my dad worked a lot, so he was away quite a lot. Not away, but he would like leave early and come back late and stuff. So I think that's probably what's led to that desire in me. And so when my wife fell pregnant, I felt more pressure because I was like, I need to, I've got 9 months basically to get this stuff in place. And then I remember going for a walk with my wife, and, she sort of knows me, obviously, and she was like, what's going on? And I just kind of broke down in tears and, grown man crying. And obviously the ego gets in the way, and you're obviously really proud and you don't like to admit that. Basically, over the years, that even though I'd been successful at a certain point, and I managed to convince her to make a move, and that going full time with property was the right thing, etc., etc. It was all okay. She trusted me, but then actually, after I went into property full time, the following 2 years, I probably lost about 100 grand in bad decision making, bad schemes, like training schemes, rabbit holes, etc. Starting a business without any kind of business experience or knowledge or kind of savvy, fueled by my ego, pretty much. And so it all came to it came obvious that it was not working pretty much when I had that little breakdown. And then it was like, okay, I've got two options: take the responsibility, make a change, and then start again type thing, or kind of grow again, or just carry on doing what I was doing, which was not very sustainable, right? So that was when it became obvious that I needed to do something about it, change something. So.
And how was Lauren, going through this? Because obviously she's pregnant, she's believed and trusted in you, and now you've opened up. How did you go through that journey together?
I mean, she's amazing. She's an amazing woman anyway. That's why I try and cling on to her for as long as I possibly can. But no, she was incredible. She was like really supportive. And I think the thing is, I think the learning for me was that I almost kind of had that traditional, well, I'm the breadwinner, so I need to take it all on my shoulders. And it was only really when, Lauren recognizing the pressures that I was putting on myself, she sort of said, well, let's share it, right? And I think, we talk about mentors a lot. You have mentors, I've mentored you, you've mentored me, etc. That's how we know each other really well. But I think there's no better mentor than your direct partner or spouse. And it was actually at that time when I almost was like, she's obviously my wife, but I think she's also now my biggest mentor, because, and vice versa, because actually the more you share, the more you get feedback and the better you communication, right? And I think I wasn't communicating enough, which also led to these issues. And to be honest with you, since then, we very rarely fall out, and the only times we do fall out is when I probably don't communicate the best I could, right? Because I haven't told her something or forgotten to do whatever. And so it all comes down to that communication. And she's really good at communicating anyway. She's a teacher, and she just has that skill set anyway. But yeah, she's been amazing, really. And ever since then, obviously that was a low period, and ever since then we've, there's always times. It's never perfect, right? But she's always there.
So when, you go through this experience, you've gone through that together, and you've now come out the other side. When did you actually get to the point which a lot of people in property expect and want and crave, where you're like, okay, I've got financial stability and I've got financial freedom, as many people describe it. And is it really possible to get to that point where you can just not stress about money?
That's a good question. I think yes is the short answer. I think it is possible to get to that point, but it also does depend what you're doing. Something I've learned about myself over the years is that I'm an entrepreneurial thinker. Like I spot an opportunity, I want to do it. You know me, right?
And we've had many a conversation. You messaged me, maybe I should try this. I'm like, Tanner, focus.
Don't do that. So as a result, that creates more liabilities as well, right? So for example, at the moment it's part of, and we'll touch on the club in a minute, but I've got staff, I've got overheads and stuff, so I could just not bother with any of that, and then it will be okay. But because I've now am responsible for paying people's wages and etc., and responsibility I have and feel for all my clients as well, then there is still an element of anxiety financially, because if I don't, if I can't sustain that as a business individual, like I can't pay them, right? So the short answer is yes, it is possible, because I think if I were to just give up, which I probably could, I could just pack the lot in, I could just walk off this show now, and just disappear. It'll be okay and we'll be fine. But that's not who I am. So I'm going to want to keep building, and I'm going to want to keep creating stuff. And I think that is the thing. I'm a creative at the end of the day, so I want to keep creating stuff, and that comes with risk, which then means that you have to offset that with some liabilities and costs and stuff. So I think the whole financial freedom word or terminology gets too many people. I think you can't control that, but there is such thing, it does exist, where you just don't have to worry about money anymore. But obviously you've got to put in a lot of graft and hard work. It doesn't just land on your lap.
And
it's the period of putting that graft in, which is actually the time which I actually think is the most enjoyable time anyway, because I've tried, we've spoken over the years, like I've tried just not having anything to do. I just go insane.
Yeah. I remember when we first met, I think one of the things I remember you saying to me was that, or not to me, we were talking, I remember I was mentoring the speaker training that you were in. And I remember you saying to me about how you'd, been very young when you could, essentially rely on your properties. I mean, how old were you when you actually could be financially stable through property?
So yeah, basically when I had my first child, so Ida, my eldest now, so she was born in 2018. I could have just been a full-time dad if I wanted to at that point, based on the outgoings that we had, the way I'd structured our house, expenses, lifestyle. Could have just stayed like that. But I think naturally you want more, right? And I think as human beings, we do want to, we evolve. You're always growing. And I think one of the key things for me is that if I'm not growing, then I just evaporate mentally. So it's then, okay, we'll go to the next stage. The next time you grow, you then take on, your lifestyle expands, so then your costs expand, etc. But so that was 20, so I would have been about 30.
Yeah, wow. And like a lot of people dream of, like, imagine being 30 and being able to be a full-time parent, if that's what you wanted, or whatever. And I think that's what I find fascinating about you, Tanner, is you've never stopped. You've always wanted to do more, and we'll talk a little bit about the conversations we've had about that. But did it change because you became a dad? Was there a part where you're like, I want to be more for my children, I want to set an example, or anything along those lines? Yeah,
definitely. I joke now with kind of my friends and clients and stuff that when I wanted kids, I wanted to be hands-on. I wanted to be that kind of, fully available dad. And now they've grown up, I want to do less of that. I want to do more jobs. I'll get away from them now. But because I've done that a little bit. But no, we still now I get to, we have breakfast and dinner every day, and I work from home as well, from the office in the garden, so I'm available. I have that flexibility and freedom to do that. So but yeah, I think that was a primary driver for me, for sure.
And what made you want to jump into property training? Because let's be honest, you and I have both attended many property trainings. It's every market's saturated nowadays, but there is a lot of stick when it comes to, some big people in the space.
Yeah.
And not only a property training, but you've also gone down the club route, which the networking groups, we've got Property Professionals Network, PPN, you've got PIN as well, some quite well-established networking groups. So what made you want to go in, first of all, as a property mentor and then start the Property Entrepreneurs Club?
So, yeah, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, I think there's a lot of good stuff in the industry, but there's also a load of shit in there. And I think it's a lot of the way it's sold. I think people are starting to get a little bit like, what's the word? They're coming a bit smarter too. So it's like the marketing techniques, the NLP, the sales techniques, etc., where people are buying on emotion because they've been built up to that emotional state to then buy something that they probably don't necessarily need and then regret. And then what we see is we now see a lot of the negativity, and unrightly so, right? Because then people have, even though they've still got to take responsibility for that decision, they've obviously been led in that particular way. So I think as a result, the industry is changing. And so the way, and to answer your question about how have I ended up where I'm at, partly I'm at where I'm at now because of that. But the way I started in property mentoring, what was that, probably 7 or 8 years ago, it kind of was a bit by accident. It was twofold. One, I started getting involved in networking anyway. And then as I was networking, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I think there's an opportunity that I could maybe help out. I started going to the Hampshire Property Network, which I'm still very active within now. And I saw it was like a nice little meeting, above a pub. There was no like sale. It was completely unaffiliated. It was a really nice vibe, but it was proper old school, right? It was like cash in hand. It was like written receipts and really small. And I spoke with the kind of the founder who'd started it a number of years before, and just sort of said, look, like, I think I could help you grow this if you're interested in growing. I could probably help you build a website. I'm, quite good at kind of attracting people in, maybe modernize it a little bit. And he was like, yeah, that sounds good. Why not? We're not really doing it from the money, but let's just see what we can create. So I jumped on board, and this is also timed with my breakdown sort of off the back of that, right? So one of the things I decided I need to do is get out more because being on my own is not good. So meet more people, right? So one of the things I did was join that network. Mark Smith, who's done a lot for me over the years as well, and he said, yeah, come on board. So I joined the Hampshire Property Network. And then it grew and grew and grew. So we got it from about 15, 20 people in the pub to, 80 people a month regularly at different venues now. So it was really cool. It stayed unaffiliated. But as a result, people would then come up to me and be like, oh, so you're doing quite well. Because by that point, I suppose I was doing okay financially. I could have kind of quit and not done anything. How did you do it? Can I buy your coffee? Can I buy your lunch? I was like, yeah, sure. And then I did that for a little while. And then again, Lauren sort of sat me down, my mentor, I suppose, and said, you're going for a lot of coffees. Like, what's this leading to? Is it leading to, I was like, oh, I was just kind of sharing she was like, have you not thought about maybe charging? I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't know if I feel like I'm, the type, like, got enough experience or enough knowledge. But, she was like, well, have a think about it. And so I did. And that's when I then reached out to other mentors. And so I then joined a program, a mastermind of my own, to pretty much, to be honest, see how they were doing it, to then copy, model, same thing, right? And so, but then I ended up being sold to, right? So I ended up went through the whole kind of like it's discovery day, and I was like, join the mastermind. I was like, and then before I knew it, I dropped like 5K on this mastermind. I was like, hang on a minute, how did that happen? They
damn it, I'm in the funnel.
Yeah, I'm in the funnel. So, but actually they were, really cool. And to be honest, like I said, that kind of coincided with a time when I felt like I needed some support anyway. So these guys, they've been really close to me since. I stayed in touch with them. And they've been fantastic. But what I also realized is that there was an opportunity for me there, because I actually knew quite a lot about property then, probably more so than they did. So I sort of, in one of our discussions, I sort of suggested them, look, would you like me to do some mentoring for you? Because I think, as you can probably tell, I could bring something to your community, right? So that started it off as well. So that's how I then started mentoring for them. I still mentor for them a little bit now, just because, you know, we you know, stay in touch, and it's good to work together and help each other out. But that's how it started. But then how it's evolved into the Property Entrepreneurs Club today is like where I've then sort of said, yeah, I think the industry needs to change, the way that it's sold to needs to change. And because I sort of kind of came from that networking sort of starting point, unaffiliated kind of non-salesy starting point, I think people value just not being, you know, just being able to get, you know, meet good people. I think the way networking events are run of also getting a bit stale. I think that needs a bit of a refresh at the moment. So we've got, you know, the networking events starting up and being done slightly differently. You know, we have like games, we have, you know, a bit of fun. Because one of my philosophies is, if you can't enjoy it, then what's the point, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's again come back to my personal experience of just putting too much pressure on myself and not really enjoying that period of my life. Like, actually now just enjoy yourself, like come along. Yes, it's a serious topic. Yes, it's about changing lives, etc., make more money. But, you know, let's have a beer. Let's play a bit of beer pong. Let's have a few games. Let's let our hair down a little bit as well. Make some good relationships, because it's actually the people around you who create the opportunities, and they're also the people who get you out of a hole when you need to. And you've got to have good relationships. Like, for example, I know if I was having a problem, I could call you and you would help me out, right? In the same way I could call all the other people who are close to me. But you've got to spend time building those relationships. And I think that's what I'm trying to create a little bit.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I'm really curious from your perspective, Tana, because as you know, I'm around a lot of property people with the speaking world that I'm in.
Yeah.
And I sort of went on the journey. I mean, you mentored me and you've mentored me so much. And it's been so great. Even with that offer recently on a house, I was like, I need to message Tanner like straight away and hope he replies as quick as possible before I accept this offer, you know? And I think one of the things I realized is I actually don't love property as much as I thought I would. You know, I watched Homes Under the Hammer and I was like, I'm going to love this shit. And I can't wait to do up properties or, you know, flip them or whatever, rent them out, like all this stuff. I love the deal analysis and everything. And even working on your book with you, I'm loving learning it. Then I'm doing it. I'm like, I don't actually think I don't think this is a bit of me. And I'm curious to know from your perspective, do you actually enjoy property, or is it more the vehicle that brings the money in?
No, I definitely enjoy it. Like, you know, just before I came here, you know, I was on the phone speaking with investors and partners and stuff and tracking deals and analysing deals. That side of things I really enjoy. It's like the structuring of the deal or finding the opportunity and creating that kind of venture. That, you know, I really enjoy that aspect. Gone are the days where I enjoyed like installing a kitchen or bath, do you know what I mean? And the actual kind of day-to-day stuff. You know, I don't really love being a landlord, for example, and all the kind of late night phone calls. Not that they ever really arrive anymore. They did in the early days. Obviously you've got to build a team around you and put stuff in place. But at the end of the day, if I own the property, it still comes back down to me, right? So if there is an issue, it comes back to me. So I have to still deal with them. But yeah, so that bit are less so, but the bit up the front, definitely. And I think more so now also working with and collaborating with people. So the majority of my deals I do now are all kind of JVs or collaborations, because again, I like working with those people, because I think if it's all mine, all on me, then I have to take sole responsibility for all the problems as well. So yeah, there's a bit of both, but I like the relationship side. Yeah, for sure.
I'm curious from your perspective, because obviously, you know, enjoying property is one thing, but what I've often found is people that make a lot of money are often doing things that they don't necessarily enjoy or they fall out of love with. Do you think there's a correlation or a connection between money and happiness?
Yes, I do. I think there is a correlation, because I think a big part of being unhappy is the stress or the anxiety of that is led to by money. Of course, you don't need money to be happy, really, but it's also how you frame it internally. And I think the world that we live in, we're constantly being told that we need more money. We're constantly being told that we need more stuff. More stuff costs more money, right? Bigger holidays, nicer holidays cost more money. So I think there is an element of that. I think materialism fundamentally means that we need more money. And for a lot of people, materialism makes them happy. Like, I like going and buying, nice new watches, and I like the experience. Like the other day I was shopping for a new car, right? So going in there sort of, but they're very short-term kind of feelings. But it really is about, for me, it's more about overall contentment. So the overall contentment is then about understanding, like, what makes me happy on a day-to-day, what kind of inspires me, what kind of gets me up in the morning. And that's working on projects, working with people, creating stuff to create more money. That will then mean that I can have more experiences with my family. Like we can go on nicer holidays, we can dine in nicer restaurants and stuff. So yes, there is a correlation, but it's obviously not 100% about money.
Yeah.
And you could do all those things without leading to needing money. My sister actually and my brother-in-law, they're very, they kind of live off the land. They're very, they're vegans. They're very sustainable. They've got like a full holding, and their life is very different, and that makes them happy and content as a result, right? So it does depend on who you are as well.
Yeah. And also, like, what does make you tick, and what it is that you love doing, right? And I think that's the difference, is you love the relationships. I love relationships as well, and I'm using them in different ways, and I'm connecting with people in different ways, like podcasting. So people say to me, oh God, I couldn't imagine anything worse than doing a whole day of interview. And I'm like, oh my God, give it to me. I mean, maybe not every day of the week. I do need to sleep and rest my voice. But whereas for me, the thought now of even like going onto a DNA analysis and getting, right move up, I'm just like, oh God, no thanks. But I think it's about finding what works for you. But it's so important to have the education and the knowledge, because I think so many people go into investments. I've personally invested at least 20 grand in actual investments, hands-off investments that have not brought a penny back. Person's ghosted me, vanished, all the deals just not done what it needed to do. And that I put down to not having the knowledge and having the understanding. And that's one of the reasons why when you went into the training world, I remember I messaged you and I was like, can I pick your brains as to which property mentor to go to? I had no idea you were even doing it.
Yeah.
And I remember us getting on a Zoom and you were like, well, I do that. And I was like, really? Do you? This is really handy because I trust you already. Like, let's make it happen. Yeah. So obviously going into the property education space has been a big part for you. And now you're taking it up a whole nother notch with your brand new book that pretty much probably by the time this is released will actually be available to the public, which feels like, I mean, we've been working on it for over a year. Like, it's just been...
It's taken a bit longer than planned.
It's been an incredible journey. So where did the idea of a book come from for you, and why bother?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's been a really exciting, and I think part of kind of coming back to one of your earlier questions about kind of what makes me tick is just doing new things. I think, for example, with the Property Entrepreneurs Club at the moment, it's like I'm running way more events this year. So this year I think we're running like 40 live events, right? And I think the reason I'm doing that is because it's something I've not done before. So it's a new thing or a new skill that I'm learning, obviously improving my public speaking, getting more confident in that space. And I think writing the book was also part of that. And I think I've not done a book before. It's my first one. I've always wanted to, or liked the idea of having a book, but then never been good at writing, or feeling like I've never been good at writing, because it takes me ages. And so the daunting task of actually sitting down and getting something first. And again, I'm a typical entrepreneur, right? Start loads of stuff and never finish them. So over the years, I've probably started 4 different books and written bits and pieces here and there, as you know. But this time it was like, and obviously getting to work with you, and you're like, well, I do book publishing. I'm like, well, this could work nicely here, right? I can help you with property, you can help me with my book. And I think that's also then where it's like, right, let's just actually make a commitment. What am I looking to achieve over the next few years? What's kind of on the bucket list? Yeah, getting a book done is one of them. It took me way longer than I was expecting, but yeah, now we've got it, and it's kind of, can hold it. And annoyingly, I haven't got one today, although I could sort of show the cameras. But it feels nice. It feels great to have ticked that box off. And so then it's a case of, right, I think another reason that probably held me back was like, what do I write about? Because I've got so much up here, but half people don't need to know about. But I think some useful stuff as well. It's like, how do I now actually convey that? Because it's then trying to also just convey a little bit of it so it's understandable and not too much all at once and makes sense, right? So that's obviously where you massively have helped to identify, right, what it is that you want to write about. Let's stay in that little zone. Let's actually, maybe convert that course or that bit of content into a book initially. then we can start growing it into maybe other books. Who knows?
Yeah.
From there.
Yeah. And there's the entrepreneurial spirit. We haven't even got the first one in our hands yet.
Yeah.
But do you know what I find really fascinating, Tana, about you and a lot of people that write books, by the way, is I've been mentored by you. And I've had people who have been mentored by me, and they read my book and they go, I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
And when I read the first draft of your manuscript cover to cover, there were so many things that I didn't know about you. There were so many bits of knowledge I didn't know you had. There was stories that you told in the book. And I think when you put it in a book, you share more, because it's not like you're speaking on stage and you're worried what people are thinking. Like, a book is a one-to-one service, which sounds crazy, right? But it's like you're writing to one person and only one person's reading it at a time. Very rarely is someone reading out a property book to a group of people. Very rarely. So there's a level of connection that comes through a book that people actually underestimate, which is why a lot of people are inspired more in books than they are in anything else.
I agree. And actually, it's funny you say that, because I think when you get sort of stuck or sucked into writing a book, you kind of download stuff, and like you said, it's a private connection between you and the page, right? So in my mind, when I was writing it, it's like no one's reading this because it's just coming naturally from my head. And then when I finished it, and it was like, okay, you got to finalize the transcript now. It's going to go to print. Like, do you want to review it? I thought I should probably get Lauren to read this before it goes out to everyone else. But then I've kind of, part of me felt a little bit embarrassed. Like, do I want her to read it? Because actually there's stuff in there that we've probably never talked about openly, right? So there was a bit of trepidation to sort of say, Lauren, do you want to read it? And so she read it, and she sort of did the first kind of review. And she was like, it's amazing. Like, it's really good. Like, I'm really proud. Like, I didn't realize all of that stuff was going on up there, and you knew that much as well. So yeah, I think there's definitely that to it as well, for sure, which I wasn't probably expecting. But now it's obviously there, and of course, yeah, there's loads of stuff, because I think you don't really feel comfortable, because I do feel I could sometimes be a bit humble, and maybe I don't sell myself or tell people enough about what I know. But it's in the book now, so people can learn it in there. They can learn what I do know, and actually it's also in a concise way, because I might not be able to communicate it verbally, but I can now in pages, right? So yeah, super excited.
Yeah, very
super excited by it.
And obviously, Do More Deals, by the time that we are releasing this, will be out, right?
Yeah.
So what is the objective of the book? So I pick up the book, obviously I've read it, but imagine I hadn't, and I can see on the cover it says Do More Deals. Like, what's the goal for the reader to achieve?
So basically the goal for Do More Deals is basically to take the reader from kind of where they're at the moment to just doing more property deals. And the content has been pretty much my journey, yes, but from like post breakdown onwards, right? So in this last sort of 6-7 years, of the things that I was doing, perhaps subconsciously initially, looking at the things that worked, and then so yeah, doing the things that I was doing that subconsciously that was working, but then take a few years later, looking back and thinking, right, how have I managed to attract that opportunity? Why have I managed to raise that amount of money from that person? Like, why do they want to work with me? How have I been able to negotiate that deal with that agent? Or why is that person sending me that off market and stuff? And so it was a few years, it was actually COVID kind of obviously was a good opportunity, I think, reset for people to kind of take a step back as well. And it was then I kind of worked on, right, well, what's been the success formula really for me since beginning of 2018 onwards to where I'm today? And what was it that I was doing that I can maybe help other people start to do more consciously rather than subconsciously, right? So that's what the Do More Deals is all about. And effectively the outcome is quite simple: for you to do more deals, right? So when you read it, you can be like, oh, okay, well, if I can start, saying this or doing this differently, and actually take some time for yourself to learn yourself, for example, is a big part of it, right? Write a business plan. 95%, I mean, that's a stat that I've made up, but I've run a lot of events, right? So I often ask the question in the room, show me your hands if you've got a business plan in property, and like 1 or 2 people put their hand up. So that was another thing. It's like, well, why don't property entrepreneurs have business plans? Like any other entrepreneur in any other business will write one down, right? They'll figure out what their market is, what money they need to raise, what area they're going to operate in, etc., and have a plan to operate within. The property industry doesn't seem to ever mention that, but they are quite happy to sell you a course on how to do this. But does this actually tie in with what you want to achieve, right? So I think there's an element of that within the book as well to help people get plan, get strategy, clarity. You know, I talk about 3 C's, right? Clarity, confidence, and consistency. Those 3 things lead to doing more deals. So how do we build clarity? Well, you do clarity by following these steps, right? How do you build confidence? Because if you're not confident in yourself to then go out and sell your product or your service or work with investors or work with partners, etc., then they need the trust, they need the likability, they need the confidence in you. So how do we build that? And then basically, how do you be a bit more consistent without flitting between all the shiny pennies, right? Because it's that consistency that will then lead to results, and that's those results that will then start building momentum, and then you kind of then go through the cycle from there.
Yeah.
So, you know, to the point when like now, you know, I'm getting stuff all the time, like more deals than I can, or opportunities that I know what to do with, which is ideal. And that's what I feel like every property person should get themselves to if they want to take it seriously, or if they want to be in property full time. They have to treat it like any other business, right?
Yeah. The thing I love though, from someone who is obviously in property but decided it's not my main thing, and actually I love doing what I do outside of that, and it's still going to be a source of income but not my main thing, there were so many things in the book that have helped me in my main business as well. So many things, like clarity, some of the very small strategies that I'd never thought of. I won't share here because it'll be a spoiler, but you know, that I'd never thought it that way. Even like how you talk about working with agents and some of the really cool strategies around that. And I've applied it to my suppliers and in my business. So for anyone that's maybe not in the property world yet, there's so many golden nuggets in there. And I think that's the best thing about a book, right? You don't know who's going to pick it up. In the same way when you run events or you do a podcast, you don't know who's going to be listening. So I guess, Tanner, I do have some final questions which I ask everyone, but I've got one more question for you, which is more of the generic side.
I'm just going to interrupt you just quickly on that point, if that's okay. Sorry. Is that actually there was a point when I was writing the book as to whether I'd do it for property or whether I flip it into like a business book because of that thing. There's so many transferable kind of pieces and nuggets in there, because actually if you take the framework that we take you through on Doing More Deals, you can totally apply that to any business. Okay, yeah, it's got the property context, but yeah, it could be any business. So maybe that's the sequel we should talk about.
There
after
we go.
This.
Here we go. The entrepreneurial side. I love it. It's like next book. Yeah, who knows? Who knows exactly. Where it could go. So that's going to be actually my next question was, what's next for Tanner H. Hicks?
Okay. What is next for me? I think at this moment in time, it's grow the Property Entrepreneurs Club into like a proper, you know, decent sized community. I think it's been running for 2 years at the point of this discussion and never really properly marketed it. It's always just been word of mouth, organic growth. And as a result of that, we've got a really great community of people because it's like, well, word of mouth, right? Somebody actually said to me the other day, there was like, they referred to it as like the Waitrose of the property training. I was like, I quite like that. That's a really nice kind of review, isn't it? Like the Waitrose, like just a good quality community. So I think for me, over the next few years, it's to grow that and start creating some more opportunities for people within the club as well. You know, for example, we've already, you know, got some of the people that they've sort of come through it. They're doing deals, yes, but they're also starting to monetize their time through giving back and being coaches and mentors, etc. So focus on that. And then for me, really, in a couple of years' time, it's just to go, maybe take a bit of time off and go a bit traveling, and it's something I've never really done. My wife did it before we got married and before we kind of met, but that's something on my list at some point. You know, take the kids on nice ventures. So, from a business perspective, yeah, who knows? I think I've got my eye on some private equity at some point in the future. I want to, you know, I'm keen to start getting involved in businesses and actually sort of helping businesses to grow as well. But that's, you know, that will come at some point as we grow the wealth and grow the profile a little bit more. But for now, it's just, grow the property. I'm just going to keep doing my deals as well, because I think it's important that I keep doing deals. And, you know, I love deals anyway. So I've got, you know, 4 active deals at the moment, development projects, etc. Keep building that. Do that for the next 2-3 years, and then review what will be 2027-ish, 26, 27-ish. So Go from there.
Yeah, I love it though, because you're always so like organized and structured, and okay, there is a bit of like let's try this, but generally it's very strategic. And I'm really curious for you, Tanner, in the business world and the property world, obviously we take big risks, and the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward is usually the frame. What's been like the worst like sleepless night you've had, or like the biggest stressor you've had in your however many years in property and business?
I think, yeah, it's a good question. I think the time when I have the most sleepless nights is when I think of an idea that I can't get out of my head, and it just goes round in my head and round and round and round of like, oh yeah, I think of all the things. So that's probably what keeps me up more than anything. I've become quite accustomed and quite good at controlling my emotions now, and I think that's one of the things I try to convey as well. And what I do is like trying to take emotion away from what you do. Think as logically as you possibly can. I've always been quite a logical thinker, but naturally, as you take risks, emotion comes into it. So, but I think, yeah, even if I had a big decision to make, that probably would keep me up a little bit, just thinking about what to do. Should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? Which is natural, but I don't really have anywhere near as many sleepless nights as I used to. I think because I've just managed to learn how to control those emotions. It's like you just park it, it'll be there, it'll still be there tomorrow. So get a good night's sleep, and then you can come back at it tomorrow with a fresh eye, with a, maybe a different angle. If you're emotionally responding to an email that someone's really pissed you off or something, or done something that you don't like, just take that step back, sleep on it, come back to it the next day.
Yeah.
And that's also how we approach our sales in the club. We never make people get the credit cards out. We sort of say, right, here's the facts. Even if you want to put your money down now, sleep on it, come back tomorrow, and then sign up with us. And what I found, having tried that model, is that the people who then come back and sign up with us always get amazing results.
Yeah.
Because they've logically taken the decision to be in the club and to join the mastermind or do some coaching with myself. They always get results. And I think that's also where we start to define ourselves differently in the industry, is that we're not going to make you run to the back of the room, because then you're only going to get buyer's remorse after the next 24, 36 hours, or the husband or the wife's going to have a go at you because you've spent what on what. Whereas if you take it away and logically explain it, sit them down and say, look, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to create, these are the risks, these are the rewards, these are the benefits, etc. It's like, yeah, let's give it a punt. Then that's also why we work with so many husbands and wives as well in our community, because they buy into it together and then they just smash things. So
yeah,
there's that to it as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of layers to investing in anything, right? And if you have your family or friends, or particularly a partner on board, it does make it somewhat easier to be able to go, actually, maybe this is the right thing or the wrong thing, because you're a team in that. And obviously, Tana, you've done that with Laura, and you've then gone on to help a lot of people do that, like you say, who are in relationships and so on. And you've been on quite an inspiring journey yourself. I'm curious, from your own experience, who's inspired you on your journey and why?
I would say a lot of people inspire me in different ways, right? I think, you inspire me and seeing what you do and what you achieve and are able to achieve in the limited time that we all kind of have. We still have the same 24 hours a day, right? You seem to do everything, be everywhere, right? So I think, yeah, you obviously inspire me. I think, there are other people within the industry, like my mentors over the years have inspired me. So like Liam and Jay, who run the Assets for Life community, the mastermind I mentioned earlier, they inspire me in what they've been able to create, and from an entrepreneurial sense, and I stay in touch with them. Mark Smith, who run the Hampshire Property Network, who I've taken over from this year, he inspires me, like, council guy who sort of ended up becoming a £20 million property portfolio kind of developer, etc. He inspires me as well. So there's loads of people out there who inspire me, I think, in different ways. And I think it depends on what you're trying to do, or what your challenge, or what the thing is that you're trying to create. But there's inspirational people everywhere. I mean, there's people who we're actually doing a thing with our kids now on a daily basis at dinner table. We sit down and say, what are we thankful for? What do we appreciate? Because, we're healthy, we're wealthy, we've kind of got, we don't have some challenges that a lot of other people have. And it's important to recognize that. And I think, and also see the people who have maybe more physical, mental disabilities and challenges that I don't have. That I'm fortunate not to have, but they do. But yet they still achieve incredible things, and you're like, they're real, like, true inspirational people, right? And I think, I think there's inspiration around us everywhere. I think often most people just don't take the moment to step back and look for it. because they kind of get stuck in their own little world and with their own problems, which are important, yes, but it's not all about us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being grateful for what you've got is just something so underrated and so important. Especially the more successful you get, it's really important to look back and be like, actually, I've done that, and recognizing wins. Now, we have a tradition on the show, Tanner, where our guests, he's like, oh dear, I haven't read the email, where our guests talk about someone that's inspired them that they think they should have on the show next. So who do you know that has an inspiring story that you think we should have on the show next?
Probably I'd say Mark Smith. Whether he would come on and I could try and twist his arm, but he's an inspiration. Like I said, sort of grew up with, from a council estate. He's in his 50s now, but he's, achieved more than probably most of us would have achieved together. So he's a very inspirational guy. His mindset's really good as well, really strong. He's really positive. There's also another guy I met recently, actually. He's been coming along to our Property Entrepreneurs Club networking meetings. I've only met him only a couple of months ago, but I jumped on a quick call with him, and he was telling me about his background and where he's basically come from. Eastern European country into the UK. He was once homeless, living on the street, and now he's and then he got into the nightclub scene. He's getting more involved in property, but he's just really positive, and yeah, I mean, he's not where he wants to get yet, but he's just hustling, and he's doing loads, and you just think to be at that point and yet still be where you are today, and turning up and being a positivity to everyone around them. I think, I'd say him as well. So, a guy called Olsey.
Okay,
I'll connect you.
Brilliant. I'd love the instructions to both of them. Yeah. So thank you, Tanner. Tanner, I mean, we can talk a lot. We have spoken for a long time, many years. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been great having you on here. And thank you so much for trusting us for publishing your brand new book.
Yes.
And sounds like it won't be the last, judging by the smile on your face.
No, I'm sure it won't be. And thanks for finally having me, Chloe. It's been a long time in the making, but no, it's good to be here. It's good to see what you're doing as well.
That's all we have time for today. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Inspired by Show, and I hope there is many things that Tanner has shared with you that you found inspiring. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you share in the comments what has been the biggest golden nugget you've taken away from this interview. What is something that Tanner shared that has inspired you to go on and maybe jump into your property journey? Who knows? And if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're listening on any of the audio platforms, do make sure, if you haven't already, you follow and subscribe to the show so you don't miss our next inspiring guest. I'll see you next week.